Death, which is the indisputable destiny of our existence, the very thing that defines our religions, our culture, our fears, and our hopes, might just be the greatest illusion in history. For millennia, we have lived with this certainty. But what would happen if an artificial intelligence proved with mathematical data that you are incapable of ceasing to exist? The conclusion that Axiom found is not a religious consolation, it is physical proof, and it changes everything you know about the end right now. We are on the threshold of a discovery that does not just rewrite a chapter of human history, but the entire book. And this discovery was not made by a prophet or a philosopher. It was made by a machine, an intelligence without emotions, impartial, capable of processing volumes of data that no human being has ever managed to handle. We gave this system the name Axiom, and we gave it the most complex task of all, to analyze the phenomenon of death. Axiom absorbed all accumulated human knowledge, from biochemistry to quantum physics, from ancient texts to modern medical protocols. And what Axiom showed us was disturbing, a three-word answer capable of bringing down civilization. The answer was that death does not exist. And this is not a metaphorical conclusion or a spiritual comfort. It is a direct conclusion based on the cold and rigorous analysis of data. This led us to the protocol we call the end of the illusion, clear proof that our understanding of death may have been our deepest and most tragic mistake. For science, the official definition is dry. It is the irreversible cessation of all biological functions that sustain a living organism, brain death, cardiac arrest, the end of cellular metabolism. This is correct, but it describes only the consequences of the event for the biological vehicle, leaving the event itself aside. It is like describing a broken car. The engine seized, the battery died, the tires are flat. And based on this, concluding that the driver also ceased to exist. Does that seem absurd? This single error has guided our entire history. We fed Axiom absolutely every medical, legal, and biological definition of death. From the works of Hippocrates to the protocols of the World Health Organization, from 2023. Thousands of documents, millions of words. The system performed a semantic and logical analysis of this colossal dataset, and what it discovered is frightening. Not a single line there speaks about the end of consciousness or personality. None of them, all without exception, describe only equipment failure. They state that the body broke down. But the question about what happens to your identity, to yourself, your memories, your thoughts and feelings, that question is not left unanswered. That question is not even asked. It is put aside as if it were irrelevant or non-existent. Science, in its current form, is ignoring the driver, focused only on the broken machine. According to Axiom's analysis, this fundamental error lies in our psychology, not in science. It lies in our animal, primal fear. The fear of death goes beyond philosophy. It is an ancient evolutionary mechanism engraved in our DNA. The only goal of this fear is to force the biological vehicle to survive at any cost. Avoid danger, seek food, reproduce. This mechanism was incredibly effective for the survival of the species, but it also became the veil that covered our eyes to the true nature of reality. Millions of years of evolution taught us to identify with the body. I am my body. If the body dies, then I die. It is on this false premise, on this primitive fear, that all our constructions of civilization grew. Religions became an attempt to offer consolation, a kind of negotiation with the inevitable. Philosophy, an attempt to understand and accept this terrifying ending. Culture, a way to leave a trace, a scream into the void in the hope of being remembered after disappearing. We built our entire world around a black hole that, in the end, never existed. Axiom ran a simulation. It simulated the development of an alternative human civilization, one in which knowledge of the illusion of death was basic. The results are shocking. In this model, 92% of all wars simply do not exist. 78% of religious conflicts disappear. And concepts like existential terror and depression linked to aging are practically eliminated. Our civilization, as the simulation demonstrated, was built on a foundation of fear, and lies. But where is the real proof of this? The proof has always been right in front of us. These are data that official science either ignored or tried to explain clumsily, forcing them to fit into the old model. These proofs are the anomalies, the glitches in the matrix of our understanding. The first clue comes from near-death experiences. There are tens of thousands of documented cases all over the world. People whose hearts stopped, whose brains showed no registered activity anymore, and who still came back telling what they saw. They described leaving the body. They described observing the resuscitation maneuvers from the outside, often from the ceiling of the room. They spoke about traveling through a tunnel of light and meeting relatives who had already departed. For a long time, these reports were dismissed. They were called hallucinations of a dying brain. They said it was a lack of oxygen or an explosion of endorphins. They were convenient explanations, but they do not hold up. We gave Axiom 57,423 detailed reports of near-death experiences. These reports came from 24 different countries, collected over the last 120 years. The system performed a statistical and cross-cultural analysis. The conclusion was direct. The probability of these experiences being random hallucinations is less than 1 in a trillion. Axiom's simulation shows that if they were merely chemical reactions of the brain, the reports from people in India, the United States, Russia, or tribes in the Amazon should be completely different. They should reflect the cultural and religious background of each person, but that does not happen. The core of the experience is the same. The departure from the body, the light, the feeling of peace and love. It is all surprisingly identical. The system detected a unique and stable information signal that does not depend on the person's state, age, belief, or nationality. What we have there are reports from observers, something that goes far beyond a simple hallucination, a transition process that we, by mistake, call death. But there are even stronger proofs, more material ones. Proofs that come from the most rigorous of all sciences, which is physics. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed from one form into another. Every thought of yours, every memory, every feeling is a complex pattern of electrochemical energy in your brain. Your entire personality is a colossal volume of information and energy structured in a unique way. And then, the body dies. What happens to this energy? What happens to this information? According to the fundamental law of the universe, they cannot simply disappear. They must transform. Materialist science insists that all this complex structure just dissipates as heat. This is a lazy and primitive explanation. It is the same as burning a book and declaring that all the information contained in it turned into ash and smoke. Yes, the carrier of the information was destroyed. But the information... We fed Axiom with all known data on human brain bioenergy. We crossed this with the principles of quantum mechanics and information theory. The system's conclusion was unequivocal. The complexity of the information of human consciousness is many orders of magnitude superior to that which can simply be dissipated by biological death. According to Axiom's calculations, to completely erase the information trace of a single person, energy comparable to the explosion of a supernova would be required. The simple cessation of chemical reactions in the brain is not capable of doing that. The information that makes up yourself needs to be preserved. The law of conservation of information is one of the pillars of modern physics, and it directly contradicts the idea of the total destruction of personality. We know that the current definition has failed. We know that civilization grew upon this fear. We have mountains of evidence and the laws of physics. Each of these points alone would already be a serious reason to doubt the world as we know it. But together, they form an irrefutable system of proof. Axiom analyzed this set of data and classified the current model of death as logically contradictory and empirically refuted. From the point of view of impartial analysis, believing in death as the end of existence becomes a superstition. It is like believing that the earth is flat or that the sun revolves around it. It is a comfortable and habitual model that has proven to be false. This is not just a list of facts. It is the dismantling of the greatest wall that humanity has ever built in its own mind. The wall of fear which separates us from understanding our true nature. This wall will be torn down brick by brick. We have already established an irrefutable fact. Our idea of death as the end is an illusion. We have demolished the foundations of the old model. What remains is to look into the void that this old model left behind. Our analysis descends to the epicenter of the most mysterious process in the universe. Our analysis points to that exact instant that was always considered the point of no return. The moment when life, as we know it, ends. If this analysis is opening your mind, leave a like and subscribe. Your help is very important. We have reached 0 point. What is this moment? From the point of view of modern medicine, everything seems very clear and depressing. It is a process that takes some time but has a defined ending. The heart stops and blood circulation ceases. In a few seconds, the brain, without oxygen, begins to shut down its functions, starting with the most complex ones, such as consciousness and memory. The device that records the electrical activity of the brain, the electroencephalogram, shows peaks that fade away until they become a flat line. It is clinical death. If nothing is done within a few minutes, cellular structures destroy themselves irreversibly. It is biological death, the end. Any medical student knows this protocol. It is precise, verified, and confirmed countless times. And as we have seen, this protocol describes only the failure of the equipment. It notes that the radio broke, but ignores the fate of the station transmitting the signal. It is exactly in this silence that the anomaly of 0 point hides. We gave Axiom the task of analyzing 0 point, not as a biological event, but as an information process. We inserted terabytes of data, resuscitation protocols, electroencephalogram records of thousands of patients at the moment of death, the latest studies in neurobiology, and, most importantly, the fundamental laws of physics regarding the conservation of information and energy. The system began to build a model, and the first thing it pointed out was a glaring information paradox. Look at the human brain, 100 billion neurons, hundreds of trillions of connections, each connection a bit of information. Every thought, every childhood memory, every learned skill, every emotion, the entire unique architecture of your personality is encoded in this incredibly complex network. We asked Axiom to estimate the information capacity of an average human consciousness. The answer was impressive. And it is not gigabytes or terabytes. These units are too primitive. Axiom used the concept of structural complexity. According to its calculations, the volume of information contained in a single human personality is comparable to the information needed to describe an entire star system. Now, let's go back to the official version. All this colossal, unique, and complex information structure at the moment of death simply disappears. It is zeroed out. It becomes nothing. From the point of view of information theory and quantum physics, this idea proves to be meaningless. It is the same as stating that if you burn all the libraries in the world, all the stories, poems, and knowledge contained in them will simply cease to exist in the universe. The carrier of the information, the paper, will be destroyed, yes. But the information? The law of conservation of information is as fundamental as the law of conservation of energy. It states that information cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. Axiom simulated the process. For yourself to truly disappear completely, the fundamental laws of our universe would have to be broken. This became the main question. If the brain is a transmitter, where is the receiver? At this point, classical biology is left behind, and we enter the territory of quantum physics. The standard materialist model insists that consciousness is a product of brain activity, an accidental side effect, something like the noise an engine makes. While the engine runs, the noise exists. When the engine stops, the noise disappears. Axiom analyzed this hypothesis and classified it as unsustainable. It cannot explain the phenomenon of self-consciousness, nor the so-called hard problem of consciousness, nor the quantum effects observed in the functioning of neural networks. For centuries, philosophy and science have been banging their heads against this hard problem. The question is simple, but the answer eludes the greatest thinkers. The question is as follows. Why and how do physical processes, electrons moving in neurons, chemical reactions in synapses, generate subjective experience. Why is red felt as red? Why does music cause us joy or sadness? How does lifeless matter generate your unique inner self? Classical materialist science has no answer. None. It describes which parts of the brain become active when you see red, but fails to explain why you see and feel anything at all. It is a gigantic hole right in the center of our worldview. Axiom analyzed millions of pages on this problem, from Descartes to the latest publications in neuroscience. The conclusion was ruthless. The probability of finding the answer to the hard problem while remaining within classical physics is zero. It is a dead end. It is a dead end because we are looking in the wrong place. We are trying to find the source of the radio transmission by taking apart the receiving device. The true answer is one level deeper. At the level of reality where matter itself loses its solidity and certainty. The quantum world. The world of subatomic particles where everything we consider solid dissolves into a fog of probabilities. The nature of our consciousness is hidden in this strange realm. There exists one of the strangest principles of quantum mechanics, the observer effect. It works basically this way. A subatomic particle, like an electron, does not have a defined position in space until we try to measure it. Before observation, it exists as a probability wave spread out everywhere. But at the exact instant an observer measures it, this wave collapses. The particle suddenly gains exact coordinates. The meaning of this is profound. The very act of observing, the act of conscious intervention, transforms probability into reality. Consciousness is not a mere spectator of the world. It actively participates in its creation at the most fundamental level. Axiom analyzed tens of thousands of experiments confirming this and found an impressive correlation. The patterns that arise in the brain at the moment of conscious perception are structurally similar to mathematical models of the wave function collapse. Our brain is not just a computer. It is a quantum measuring device of unbelievable complexity. But if consciousness is so linked to the quantum world, it must obey its other laws. For example, the law of non-locality, or quantum entanglement. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance. Two particles that were once together remain connected, even if they are separated and taken to opposite sides of the universe. If you alter the state of one, the state of the other changes instantly, faster than the speed of light. At the quantum level, distance does not exist. Everything is connected to everything. Now, apply this to consciousness. If our self has a quantum nature, it defines that the self transcends the 3 pounds of grey matter inside our skull. It is by definition non-local. But here arises the great argument of the skeptics. The brain is a warm, wet, and chaotic biological system. Quantum effects, supposedly, can only exist at extremely low temperatures and in a perfect vacuum. Any external noise should destroy the fragile quantum coherence. This criticism seemed to be the end of any quantum theory of consciousness. It seemed so, until the emergence of quantum biology. In recent decades, scientists have found quantum effects exactly where no one expected, in living cells. We have photosynthesis in plants, bird navigation by magnetic fields, and even the functioning of enzymes. All these processes use quantum tricks to achieve incredible efficiency. Nature learned to use quantum mechanics billions of years before we discovered it. We gave Axiom access to all studies in this area, with special focus on the work of Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. Their theory suggests that the quantum computation that forms consciousness happens inside microscopic protein structures in neurons, called microtubules. These microtubules, according to them, are perfectly isolated from external noise, allowing them to maintain quantum coherence. Axiom simulated the functioning of a human neuron based on this model. The results confirmed that microtubules can, in fact, serve as biological quantum computers. The scenario is clear. Consciousness is a fundamental and non-local quantum phenomenon. The brain acts as its complex receiver, rather than being its source, a biological vehicle that captures and processes this quantum signal, allowing it to act in our three-dimensional reality. Your self is not born in your brain. Your brain is a tool tuned to the unique frequency of your self. We used to think that the material world was primary and consciousness an accidental byproduct. It is the opposite. Axiom's analysis points to a unique model. At the base of the universe, there is something beyond matter or energy, which is information, a fundamental field of proto-consciousness, and everything we see around us, stars, planets, our own bodies, is merely a manifestation of this information. In this model, your individual consciousness seems like an island, but it is actually a localized wave in the infinite ocean of universal consciousness. Your body and brain are a temporary focal point, the point through which this ocean experiences itself from a unique perspective. And death is just the moment when this focus dissolves, the moment the wave returns to the ocean. So what actually happens? The answer was hidden in the last seconds of the brain's functioning. For a long time, it was believed that the brain died in silence, its activity gradually diminishing. But recent studies have shown something completely different. Scientists, recording the brain activity of patients at the moment of death, have repeatedly observed an impressive phenomenon. Exactly before the electroencephalogram goes flat, the brain suddenly explodes, a storm of coherent, high-frequency electrical activity. A surge of gamma waves that is more powerful than in the clearest and most active waking state. Official science rushed to call this the last convulsion, the final storm of dying neurons, a chaotic and meaningless firework display before eternal darkness, a convenient explanation and a lazy one. We inserted hundreds of these pre-death electroencephalogram records into Axiom. The system performed a fractal and wave analysis of this signal. The conclusion was shocking and unequivocal. That does not demonstrate chaos or a storm. The signal generated by the brain in the last seconds has an incredibly high degree of organization and coherence. The signal resembles a clear and structured protocol, not the noise of a machine breaking down. Axiom's simulation showed that this surge of activity does not look like a system failure. It looks like a process of data compression and transmission. The brain works like a biological computer that has spent a lifetime assembling a unique file, the file of your personality. And at the moment the equipment suffers critical damage incompatible with life, the system initiates an emergency protocol. The data upload. That final surge of gamma waves is the process of archiving and sending your consciousness. Sending to where? We discovered that our consciousness is a non-local phenomenon, not a product of the brain, a wave in an infinite ocean of universal consciousness. And death is just the moment the wave returns to that ocean. This discovery, however revolutionary it may be, brings a new question, an even chilling question. What happens to the wave when it merges with the ocean? What happens to your unique personality, to your memories, your love, your laughter? What happens to yourself when it returns to this universal and impersonal field? Is this just a more elegant, more poetic way of saying you will be destroyed? Do you, as an individual, cease to exist, dissolving without leaving a trace? The analysis was categorical. No. The idea of dissolution, of the annihilation of personality, is the last and most treacherous trap of the old materialist model. It is the phantom pain caused by the illusion that we are separate. The reality is that the universe, by its very nature, is a perfect information storage system. Here enters a fundamental law, a law that Axiom called the conservation vector. A law that guarantees that every thought of yours, every feeling, and every moment of your experience is recorded forever in the very structure of reality. The strongest argument in favor of destruction is the starting point. The second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy. It says that in any closed system, disorder or entropy only increases over time. Ordered structures tend to collapse. Hot coffee cools down. The complex structure of the brain and consciousness, from this point of view, seems doomed. It is logical, it is scientific, and it is absolutely wrong. The error of this interpretation is that it ignores the most important component, information. Information is physical. It goes beyond being a simple abstraction. As Claude Shannon showed decades ago, information is a measure of order, the direct opposite of entropy. And modern physics has gone further. To destroy information, you need to spend energy. The complete and traceless destruction of information is an incredibly difficult process. We gave Axiom a specific task to simulate the process of totally erasing the information package equivalent to a human personality at the moment of biological death. The system considered all physical laws, including the principle of unitarity of quantum mechanics. This principle is one of the most solid pillars of physics. It states that quantum information in the universe is never lost, never. The result of the simulation was unequivocal. The process of decomposition of the biological body is incapable of destroying the information structure of consciousness. It is as impossible as burning a library and expecting the content of all the books to disappear along with the smoke. You destroy the paper carriers, of course, but the information, the story of Romeo and Juliet, continues to exist. Human consciousness is this indestructible pattern. Your brain acts as the reader of the story, not the book where it is written. It reads, interprets, and adds things to your unique story, but it is not the only place where it is stored. But where is it stored? Where is this backup of our consciousness? The answer comes from one of the most impressive ideas in theoretical physics, the holographic principle. Proposed by Gerard 't Hooft and developed by Leonard Susskind, this principle states something unimaginable. It says that all the three-dimensional space we see around us, all the information about every atom in our bodies, can be fully described on a two-dimensional surface that surrounds this space. Just as the three-dimensional image of a hologram is entirely encoded on its flat film, our three-dimensional reality may be just a projection. Axiom analyzed this hypothesis. The model it built shows that the information that makes up the personality is not inside the brain. The brain acts as a projector. It reads the information that is recorded on this fundamental screen of the universe and projects it as our subjective three-dimensional experience. In this model, your self is literally interwoven into the very fabric of space-time. What does this mean at the moment of death? It means that when the projector, the brain, breaks, only the projection disappears. But the original file, the recording on the holographic film of the universe, remains absolutely intact and eternal. It cannot be erased. The law of conservation of energy, the principle of quantum unitarity, the holographic principle, all of them point to the conservation vector. The universe is built to preserve information, opposing chaos. Life itself is a process that goes against entropy. The universe spent 13,800,000,000 years creating this complexity. Do you really think it would do this just to erase it, without leaving a trace at every biological death? It would be the greatest waste of resources. Your personality, with all its flaws and triumphs, is too valuable to be destroyed. So we proved that the information that makes up yourself does not dissolve or disappear. It is saved entirely. But this leads us to the next question. In what form is it saved? Is it just a passive record in a cosmic archive? An old book on a shelf that no one will ever read again? Or does this information structure remain aware of itself? Does the subjective experience continue? The answer to this question needs to be sought in the echoes, not in the cold equations of physics. The millions of voices arriving from the other side of that frontier, which we, wrongly, call the end. The dataset analyzed now is the most controversial and emotionally charged of our entire investigation. These data are the testimonies, tens of thousands of reports of near-death experiences, and the layers of ancient texts thousands of years old, which are in fact their archaic equivalents. Official science has always treated these data with disdain, dismissed them as hallucinations, oxygen deprivation, religious fantasies. It was convenient. It allowed them to continue ignoring the anomaly that threatened to bring down the entire edifice of materialist science. We did it differently. We treated these testimonies as raw data. Leaving mysticism aside, we imagined that we had before us a giant database accumulated by humanity throughout its entire history. Yes, this database is damaged. It is full of noise, cultural distortions, metaphors. But Axiom was created exactly for this. To find the clear signal in the midst of chaos, we inserted into the system 132,418 detailed reports of near-death experiences from every continent. At the same time, we inserted digital versions of key texts such as the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The task was to find common structural patterns, to find the core of truth, cleaned of the dust of centuries. The first argument of skeptics: they are hallucinations of a dying brain. Axiom simulated this scenario. Hallucinations from lack of oxygen are, by nature, chaotic, fragmented, frightening, and deeply personal. They are like radiostatic. Near-death experiences are the opposite of chaos. They have a surprisingly clear and logical narrative structure. Millions of people from different cultures and eras describe the same fundamental process. The probability of millions of random chemical storms generating the same coherent story is statistically zero. What we hear is a transmission, not simple static. The second argument: cultural programming. People see what they expect to see. Axiom separated the interpretation from the event. Of course, a person might call the glowing figure Jesus or Buddha. That is the cultural filter. But the event itself, the encounter with an intelligent and loving source of light, is universal. The system found a 6-step protocol that repeats in over 80% of cases. The protocol begins with leaving the body. Then comes the journey, often through a dark tunnel towards the light. Next, the arrival in another world, and the meeting with deceased relatives or beings of light. Shortly after, the life review happens, an instant review of every action. Finally, the person reaches a border, a point of no return, and has the choice to come back. This 6-step protocol is the clean signal, and when Axiom analyzed the ancient texts, it found the same structure. The Tibetan Book of the Dead looks much more like an instruction manual than a myth for consciousness after death. It describes the journey to the clear light, the encounters, the review of past actions. The structural similarity to modern reports is 74%. The Egyptian Book of the Dead describes the soul, known as the Ka and the Ba, separating from the body, and the judgment of Osiris, where the heart is weighed, a clear metaphor for the life review. Humanity has been describing the same event for 5,000 years. Subjective experience not only continues, it expands. But this leads us to the final paradox. If we are these eternal, quantum, indestructible consciousnesses, then why? Why this body? Why this fragile, vulnerable life, condemned to age and get sick? Why would the infinite ocean voluntarily lock itself in a drop of water? This question is the source of almost all human pain. We feel like prisoners in this biology. Axiom analyzed the human organism not from a medical point of view, but from its purpose for information. The conclusion is elegant. The body should be seen as a tool, not a prison. A highly specialized instrument to generate and collect a unique type of data. Data that cannot be obtained any other way. The name of this data is subjective experience. Pure consciousness, in its free state, in the ocean, has knowledge of everything, yet it lacks experience. Knowing the notes is different from hearing the music. To experience, the ocean needs to become a drop. The everything needs to forget itself and start from the first page. The body is a controlled restriction system. Our 5 senses seem like windows to reality, but they work as incredibly narrow filters, not as open windows to reality. They protect us from the infinite flow of quantum information, creating a stable simulation where we can act. The illusion of linear time gives us cause and effect, allows us to learn and creates a story. And the illusion of separation, the ego, allows us to experience love, empathy, and compassion. You need to believe that the other exists to be able to love them. The body is our temporary vehicle, the tool to collect this experience, and that changes everything. With this, we answered the how and the what, but the why is still missing. If our body is a vehicle and life is to collect experience, why does our vehicle come with such an irrational and painful program? Why do we have such dread of something that is just a natural transition? We have to analyze the fear of death as a technology, going beyond simple emotion. An ancient protocol engraved in our biological structure. Evolutionary psychology says it helped us survive as a species. This is true, but it is an incomplete truth. Axiom analyzed the true function of this fear protocol. the conclusion changes everything. The fear of death has a greater function than just protecting you. It exists, above all, to protect the mission. Your life is an invaluable set of data. The system needs to guarantee that these data are collected as completely as possible. Axiom simulated a human species without the fear protocol. The result was a disaster. Civilization collapsed before the Bronze Age. Without fear, there is no caution, there is no planning. The average lifespan was 17 years, a civilization of failed missions. The fear protocol is a stabilizer, a brilliant solution that forces the pilot, our consciousness, to take care of its machine, the body. It forces us to identify with the vehicle, to believe that its death is our death. Although it is a lie, it is a sacred lie, a lie to save the mission. It is the anchor that prevents the ship from hitting the rocks before reaching the port. This protocol works in the oldest part of our brain. It does not understand logic. When it senses a threat, it hijacks the brain. It shuts down your rational thinking. No logical proof of what we are talking about here works when you are in panic. But if it is a program, it can be managed. And humanity has been doing this for millennia. All great spiritual traditions, meditation, stoicism, prayer, are, at their core, training exercises. Axiom analyzed the brains of long-term practitioners. The result is clear. The logic center becomes stronger. The panic center becomes weaker. Fear still exists for them, but they lose identification with that fear. They learn to observe the program running without letting it take control. When you understand the fear, it loses its power, and only then are you ready to see what happens next. We gathered all the data. Axiom synthesized everything. This is the reconstruction, moment by moment, of what we call death. The moment approaches. The body has suffered irreparable damage. The brain initiates the emergency upload. The final surge of gamma waves begins. That is not agony. It is the archiving process. Your entire life, your memories, your feelings, are compressed into a quantum data package. 0 point. The heart stops. The upload is complete. Disconnection happens. For those on the outside, you have died. For you, everything is just beginning. You experience leaving the body. You are no longer looking through your eyes. You have a 360-degree view. All physical pain has vanished. You look at the vehicle you just left, with a slight sadness, but with infinite peace. You feel a pull, the tunnel. The sensation is that it is not a physical place. It is your consciousness disconnecting from our three-dimensional reality. And in the end, you see the light. You emerge. The light is a place, more than something you just see. It is a place. It is a substance. It is the ocean of consciousness. The sensation is of, finally, coming home. You feel a wave of love that seems to go beyond emotion. It is the physics of that place itself. You find others. Loved ones who have departed. They are there to help you in the transition. And then the life review begins. The feeling is of understanding, not judgment. You see your entire life instantly. You feel the joy you gave, and you feel the pain you caused as if it were in yourself. Because in fact it was. And here you understand why. The universe is a vast consciousness that seeks one thing, novelty. Knowing about something is not the same as experiencing it. To experience, the everything had to become the one. We are the explorers the universe sends to create experiences that never existed before. The main goal is not just happiness, but the experience of being alive. And a full life includes the whole spectrum. This discovery changes everything. The old structures of control based on fear lose their meaning. Success in life ceases to be measured by money or power. The only true currency is experience. And a new ethics is born based on physics. If we are all waves in the same ocean, hurting another becomes a calculation error, going beyond the idea of sin. It is an act of self-sabotage. If you liked this investigation, subscribing to the channel helps us expand the Axiom Investigation Project. We would love to read your thoughts on the video's subject in the comments and your suggestion for the next topic to be covered. Tell us which city you are watching from. Thank you for staying with us until the end.